This is how you nail a teacher's audition. Hi friends, I'm Michael James Wong, and on today's Teacher's Talk, we're going to talk about the things that you need to know to nail a teacher's audition. Now for me, I've been teaching for the better part of 2 decades, and I've been lucky enough to be on both sides of the teaching audition process. Earlier on in my career, as the teacher coming in to trial, to do the audition process, and then later on in my career to be the person on the other side, having teachers come in, trialing them, auditioning them, and selecting the ones that fit best the studio that I was working in at the time. Now today I want to talk to you about what I would be looking for on the other side of a teacher's audition when someone was coming in to trial or audition for a studio. Now, of course, every studio is going to be different. Every teacher who's trialing is going to be different and unique, but there's definitely some similarities and common factors that are important when new teachers or teachers who aren't teaching at the studio are coming into audition through the process of wanting to join either the cover list or the teaching staff. Now, here, let me talk about first is the different ways or the common ways auditions usually happen. Now, these days, there's a few different ways that it happens. The first and probably the most common one is still come into the studio and join a trial or an audition. This usually happens every few months or whenever the need is, where new teachers or teachers who want to join the teaching team will be invited in to do a trial audition. Now, usually this takes place in a group environment. It feels a little bit like a casting call where 6 to 10 teachers will come in and they'll be invited to teach a little part of a section of class, 10, 15 minutes class, while the rest of the group are the students. So let's take, for example, there's 6 teachers who are invited in. Each of the teachers are asked to teach 10 minutes and it's an hour-long class. So you'll line up or you'll put your mats down and you'll either teach first, second, third, fourth, fifth, or sixth, wherever your mat is, and that will be your little audition. Now, here's a few tips that are helpful. If you get invited into that environment, one of the things that I tend to say is put yourself in the best position to help yourself. So if possible, put yourself in position 1 or position 6, which means you get to start the practice or close the practice. That means you have an opportunity to have a little bit of control or a little bit of understanding of how the practice is going to be before you even start teaching. Now, that might not always be the case, and that might not always be possible. You might put your mat down and they'll say, all right, based on what time you guys arrived, you're first, you're second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth. And so if that's a factor, that's a helpful tip. If it's not, it's not. Now, the other thing that will often happen is that they'll ask you to teach whatever you want in this 10-minute section. So if I'm the teacher doing the trials, I say, great, welcome all in. You've got 10 minutes each, teach whatever you want, put forward whatever you think is appropriate for the time, and we'll use that as your teaching trial. Now, what's great about that is you have the freedom of choice. What's not great about that, especially if you're newer to the audition process, is trying to figure out what to do in that 10 minutes. Now, what I would tend to say is there's 2 approaches. You can be progressive, as in whatever the person before you taught, you pick up where they left off and you keep going. That can be a little bit more challenging purely because you have to really be switched on to make sure that your sequencing and your practice that you're offering in the 10 minutes is intentionally progressive. Now, sometimes a studio will ask you to do that. They'll say, okay, you're teaching first, second, third, and say, Vanessa's in the third spot. Vanessa, I'd like you to teach third, and I want you to pick up wherever person 2 left off, and then the person after you will pick up wherever you left off. Now, of course, that's a bit more of a challenging environment, but if that's the case, that's the case. And so what you want to do is you want to really pay attention when you're practicing and really make it valuable and simple. Now, my recommendation always is if you have a 10-minute slot, don't try to overcomplicate it. Don't try to be fancy and weave in a million things. What I'm looking for if I'm the person doing the trial or hosting the trial is I'm looking for clarity of sequence, competency of cueing. I want personality, and I want you to be live in the room so I know that you're working within the space. And so having some sort of pre-prepared dialogue or some sort of fancy theme that you're weaving in, it doesn't make it real. And so one of the best things I'm looking for is someone who says, hi everyone, welcome into the space. I'm going to do my 10-minute trial. And of course, this is a unique environment. So please take rest where you need. We're going to work through some lunging in our sequence. So make sure you stay balanced, steady, grounded. And of course, if there's modifications you need to take that. I'll give you some cues along the way and really clue into your breath, clue into your steadiness, and allow yourself to have this time to be in the practice, even though the environment can be unique. If someone did that as their little kind of 30-second intro to their section, I'm already going, this is interesting because this person's in the room. They understand the dynamic. They're making sure they have their safety cues. They make sure they're keeping it simple and clear. They're not trying to throw fanciness or trying to be overly creative to impress me. I've been teaching long enough and I've been doing enough trials on the hosting side where I'm just looking for someone that I can trust to hold the space together, can teach and cue well, and can have a certain sense of personality or warmth that is going to be welcoming into the studio that I'm working in. As I was saying, sometimes you're going to be told where or what to teach. Other times they'll just give you this freedom to say, do whatever you want and whatever you think is appropriate. Now, of course, usually my brain is always going to go, if that's the case, I'm often going to go with lunging sequencing, mainly because it has that complexity enough to show you that I have an understanding of asymmetrical sequencing, lunging. I can move you through chaturangas and vinyasas, but I can also take you through twists. I can take you through extended side angles, triangle sequencing. I can give you enough foundational understanding of my technique, my ability to cue, my ability to weave in the breath, but it's not so complex that it's going to be long, complex movements that are going to confuse myself or confuse everyone else in the room. My ultimate aim when I'm teaching in that environment, in that trial period, is to make sure that I'm clear, precise, and I'm supportive to the room, but I'm also showing all of me and my personality, not just my ability to cue postures. Now, that's probably the most common way to do that. And in that environment, sometimes it can be quite intimidating because you have other teachers that are there teaching. And, if you're someone who kind of goes fourth or fifth in line, the first three people before you could be arguably amazing. Or the first few people before you could mess up a little bit and it kind of throws your confidence. The reality is that's one of the common ways in which trials are happening, and you have to just make sure you're preparing yourself to do the best possible audition as you can. Now, the second opportunity that sometimes happens in a trial environment is you'll be invited in to just do your trial one-on-one. Sometimes they'll say, hey, swing by, we'll do a little 10-20 minute practice one-on-one, and you'll usually do it with me, like the person hosting the trial, or someone else. And what that means is you have an ability to have a one-on-one session where you're teaching someone of the teaching team or teaching staff to really make the most of that time and to really show your teaching ability. What I would say in those environments, don't jump to just try to do good sequencing. Really be a good person. Have a welcoming conversation. Be complimentary of this space. Hey, I love this space. I've practiced here before. I love so-and-so's class because it's strong, and I love so-and-so's class because it's so warm and supportive. I'm letting them know I'm a part of the community, or I've been in the community. I'm not just coming in as some out-of-context person to teach. What that means is if you do have that environment, and this goes for all types of trial auditions, is if I'm going to a studio where I want to teach at, I'm definitely going to go practice there at least a few times before my trial. I'm going to go meet some of the teachers and say hi. I'm going to have a chat with reception. I'm going to get a vibe of the studio, and I'm going to bring in some personal touches and personal insights that allow you to know, or whoever's hosting the trial, that I'm not just coming in for myself. I'm here to be a part of the community. And that can be one of the most important things to do to put yourself in the position of success. And then the other way that's increasingly more common these days is video submissions, where essentially they're going to ask you to submit a 10 to 15 minute video of you teaching in a way where they can just see how you are as a teacher. Now, of course, it's a little bit different because you're through a screen, and it's adding another element that you might not be familiar with teaching on camera. But the reality is sometimes studios are too big, too busy, too time poor to host these auditions, and so having you send something in means they can do it in their own time. If this is the case, you also have the ability to control what you sent in, which means you can plan and prepare a little bit more. Now, the recommendation I will give you in those environments, if you are sending in a video, is prepare it in a way where it feels as authentic and supportive as possible through the screen. So obviously you can record it on a phone. That's no problem at all. If you have microphones, use those really so they can hear you and it's clear. You can also sometimes ask if you can borrow them from a friend or another teacher. These days, hopefully getting a hold of something that has good quality audio microphones is a little easier than it used to be. Now, here's what I would do in that environment. Well, let's start with what I wouldn't do. What I wouldn't do is set up the camera and put myself on a mat and then just do the class while I talk to the floor or talk to myself in a downward facing dog. That's going to be really clumsy. It's going to feel really impersonal. You're going to get out of breath a little bit, and it's not going to feel very engaging. You need to switch the format up where you're really speaking to the camera as if that is the student in the room. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to recruit a friend to be my student. So I'm going to set it up where I'm going to have my friend as a student, and I'm going to teach. I'm going to look straight at the camera and say, "Hi, so-and-so. Thank you so much for having me in for this teaching audition. This is a 10-minute video where I'm going to share with you a little bit of a sequence on how I teach, give you some insights to the way I cue. I'm going to tee it up in a way where they are getting some really good information." It also means as a video, they have the ability to hear anything I want to share with them. Just want to let you know, I've been teaching for 2-3 years. I live locally to the studio. I love coming in. It's such a warm, friendly environment. Everyone's great. I love Jackson's class. He's so cool, and I just really love the fact that it's a community that I'd love to be a part of and be able to share some of my teaching. Okay, so in this 10-minute sequence, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you a little bit of a lunging sequence that I've prepared, which takes you through safe movements or steady movements that allows the body to have grounding and folding and twisting and whatever else I want to talk about. I've also recruited in my friend Vanessa, who's going to be my student, so she'll be able to do the sequence while I talk to you, cue you through it, and support it as much as possible. What I'm doing is I'm making this as engaging as possible for the person watching it, while also making sure I can present myself forward in a way that shows the viewer or the person doing the trial the way in which I teach, the clarity of my cues, and it gives me, as the person auditioning, one less thing to do. I don't have to worry about being in down dog, catching my breath with my face bright red. The essence of this all is I'm just trying to be as supportive as possible and put myself forward in the best possible way. So those are the 3 ways in which I'm going to look at this. You could be coming in studio to do a group audition. You could be doing a one-to-one audition, or you could be an online or video submission. Neither one is better than the other. They're all just different formats, and every studio will have their different ways. 4th way that sometimes happen on a very rare occasion is that if, for example, they know that you're interested in coming in to audition or do a trial, and you're kind of maybe already part of the community and you're just kind of quote unquote waiting in the wings for the invitation. Sometimes studios get busy and teachers call in sick, or teachers take holidays and they're just short of a cover teacher. They just don't have anyone that can fill in this exact spot, this Tuesday lunchtime class with the teacher called in sick an hour ago and there's nowhere else around. And this happens a lot more often than you think. You might get a phone call and said, "Hey, what are you doing in an hour? Can you come teach this class? It's a cover class. We'll use it as your trial. Come on in and do it." If that ever happens to you, if you can, say yes. It's going to be a little bit daunting in the moment to go, "Oh my God, I can't get ready. I got to prepare. What's going to happen?" Just say yes. Because going in is already putting you in a great position. You're helping them out fill the class so their students don't have to be canceled on. And you're also stepping into a space where you already know that you're welcome and invited, and they want you to be there. Go in and just teach a good, solid, steady class. Nothing fancy, nothing crazy. Just teach a really good general class. Now, obviously, make sure it's in line with what the class is on offer, and only say yes if it's a class that's a style that you're available to teach. Don't go in to teach a yin class if you're not yin trained. Don't go in to teach a mandala class if you're not mandala trained. You could say, "Hey, I'm not mandala trained, but actually, can I just do a strong vinyasa, and we'll keep it moving today, and we'll do it that way. Are you okay with that?" By doing that, you're stepping into a position where you're putting yourself on to shine. And the best thing you can do is go in with a positive attitude, go in excited to be there. Let everyone know that you're here last minute and you're here to help out, and you love the community, and you're going to do your best to make sure they all walk out feeling great. That's a great way as a 4th option. And sometimes by doing that and doing a good class, all of a sudden you'll find yourself on the cover list straight after that. A little tip I'd say is, if that's ever the case for you, and if anywhere down the line you're covering and you're trying to get a little bit more support to get a full-time teaching slot at that studio, at the end of your class, you say, "Hey everyone, this was a cover class. I'm so excited to be here. If you enjoyed that, I'm really trying to be in the community as much as possible. So if you could just let reception know you had a good time, and I'll try to get back here as much as possible." What we call social proof is one of the best ways to have a studio really be inclined or excited to have you join the teaching team. So those are the different teaching audition formats that I want to talk to you about today. Group sessions, one-to-one sessions, video sessions, or last-minute invite. And whatever format you go in, know that there's a certain criteria that's going to be really essential for you to focus on. Personality is a big one. Knowing that you can hold the space, that you're a person that's engaging, dynamic, or you have the ability to hold a space for a room of strangers. Competency in your ability to teach safely, so good quality cues, sequences that make sense, nothing fancy, nothing crazy, just good teaching in a way that's clear and accessible for the room. When you have those two things, the third thing is just the ability to be live, to be in the space and to be a part of that community. And that can be a really beautiful thing to do, and a really meaningful thing to do, is just to say, you know what, I'm here, I'm excited to be here, and I'm going to do my best to be supportive. At the end of the day, yes, elements of philosophy are going to be helpful. Hands-on assisting can be helpful. But what I will say is they can work against you if they're not executed well. If someone does some great cueing and great sequencing in a trial, but their hands are in the wrong place and their philosophy is all over the shop, that can work against you, because it now makes me feel like you have places in your practice that aren't as understood or studied or competent. And so make sure that you're weaving that in with clarity, with confidence, and take your time to prepare in a way that you can feel really good about what you're sharing. The last thing I want to say on this, and this is the important part as well, nailing audition is something that's within your control. Going in well prepared, executing well, and being just a really good human being in that room. But nailing an audition doesn't always mean you're going to get the job, doesn't always going to mean you're going to join the cover list. And that's the truth of it. Sometimes if I'm hosting a trial audition, I'm looking for a certain kind of teacher. I'm looking for someone who's vibrant, bright, and bubbly. I'm also could be looking for someone who's a little bit more steady, stern, philosophy-led. I could be looking for someone who's a bit older, more mature. I could be looking for someone who's a bit younger. Sometimes I could literally be looking for men to fill the schedule, or sometimes I could be looking for women to fill the schedule. And so sometimes you have to realize and know that it's okay that you might not be exactly what the studio is looking for at that time. And don't take it personally. And hopefully in that environment, you'll realize, or they'll share with you, that was the case. But, keep going with the process. It's something that never doesn't stop feeling a little bit strange, that process of auditioning to teach, but it does get easier, and you become more comfortable in sharing who you are. And when you do that, you become a little bit more okay if it doesn't work, right? If it's not for you, it's not for you. The last thing I'll say, which I think is helpful, is no matter what happens in these auditions or trials, they're going to communicate back to you and let you know how it went. Now, if it goes positively and say, we'd love this and would like you to join the cover list, that means we'll put you on the cover list, and whenever there's classes, you can jump in. There'll be other times they'll contact you and say, thank you so much for coming in, but it wasn't the right match for us at this time. Either which way, I would always say is you should ask for feedback. Just some very helpful, positive, constructive feedback. And it could be verbally or in an email. You say, hey, thank you so much for letting me know. Let's just say it was a yes. Thank you so much for letting me know. I'm always trying to get better at what I'm doing. If there's any feedback for me that would be more relevant for the studio, anything that you think as a senior teacher could be helpful to help me, please let me know. It shows that you're willing to learn, you're willing to be part of a team, and it really helps you move forward in that studio environment. If you get a no, it's the same thing. Thank you so much for letting me know. Totally understand if it's not the right fit. For me, I'm really working on trying to get on the cover list at different studios. It would be a huge, huge help for me if you could just give me a little bit of feedback on what didn't work or why maybe I wasn't the right fit. I would hope that any teacher on the hosting side, the reason they are hosting the auditions, because they have a certain level of clarity, competency, and willingness to support, that they'll share with you some notes back. I would say something like, thank you so much for your question about the feedback. The reality is your cues weren't as succinct. Your breath cues felt a bit off. It felt like you were reading from a script in the back of your brain, or you weren't watching the room, or maybe you felt a little bit timid. Even though it can be a little bit hard to take that feedback on board, it's ultimately going to be hugely helpful for you to learn from that when you hear that and get that feedback. So in this whole conversation, hopefully this was helpful in some way. How to nail an audition is a process that is never ending. And remember, it's always going to be different. Every place you go to, it's going to be different every time you do it. The dynamics are going to shift. But you, as the teacher coming in, offer what's meaningful for you. Offer what feels good to you. Show up in a way that you're prepared. Make sure you share a good, solid sequence with clear cues, accessible language, modifications, and then be it in a way where you're live and in the room and allow them to see who you are and see what you can bring and share to the community. These are my tips for how to nail an audition. I hope they're helpful for you, and I look forward to seeing you go from here. You can always drop me a comment below or drop me any questions about anything that I talked about today or any other things that pop up in your mind, but I hope that this was helpful in some way. Thanks for joining Teachers Talk. We'll see you next time. Peace.